So Ramadan is supposed to be a time, from a health perspective. I'm not speaking about the ibadat and the primary maqsad of Ramadan, which is to attain taqwa, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. And the ulama have elaborated on it. Logically, a person who is able to stay away from that which is normally halal for that period of time and exert themselves in the time when they are allowed after iftar to exert themselves in taraweeh and other ibadat. This will create the ability in the person to stay away from haram, stay away from those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited, and also to stay away from even coming near to the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. And that is the essence of taqwa. The cautiousness that a person has to not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what taqwa is according to the ulama. It's commonly translated as fear, but it's a very poor translation. Taqwa has no connection with the word fear. So I don't know why this became, the common translation. I don't think if you even look in the dictionaries, you will find fear. Ittaqi and tuqa and, taqwa, where it comes from, regards a person who's careful. So the better translation is to be careful, to be cautious. And some ulama have explained, like a person who is wearing a very fine clothing that can easily tear, and they come across a place where there is a lot of thorns. So, thorn bushes. So they would walk extremely carefully so that none of the thorns can touch their clothing and tear it. So this is the feeling of taqwa, that a person treads very carefully so that they do not do anything that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the training for that is the fasting in the month of Ramadan. There are, of course, other things that will produce taqwa, but this is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So through this, you will attain taqwa, or the object of this is to attain taqwa. The secondary benefits of the month of Ramadan and fasting in general is that it will improve your health. This is people are conflicted about this. They feel that, can we have this intention that the Ramadan fasting will be good for my health? Or is there something wrong? No, it's not something wrong, because it comes in the books of hadith: fast and regain your health or become healthy. Then what remains is, you have a primary objective of fasting, which is to attain taqwa, and you have benefits of fasting that go beyond the attainment of taqwa. But those benefits with regards to health, 99% or probably more of the Muslim Ummah are not achieving it when they fast, because of the bad habits that we have, and what we're eating, and how much we eat at the time of iftar or afterwards, and the other habits that we have of staying awake the entire night. Some countries, that's the norm, and meaning that even the shops are open, people are out and about. Yes, we can describe it as a very nice atmosphere. I'm not saying that it isn't. We've all probably experienced it at some time, but it's not necessarily the best thing for health. And remember that there's a very close relationship between one's health and one's ibadat. So it's quite significant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Quran also, Allah connected the eating of halal and tayyib with ibadah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected the eating and the consumption of good food with the performance of good amal. So there's a very close connection between the two. So when a person's health is good, and look, the connection with health, obviously, the thing that has the biggest impact on a person's health that they have the ability to control is what food they eat. There are some things that have a bigger impact on health that are out of our control. For example, if a person lives in an environment where there are toxins and there are pollutants, or there are chemicals in the air, this will definitely have a bigger impact on their health, but it's out of their control. But that aspect which is in our control and has the greatest impact on our health is our diet, what we eat and what we drink. So what we eat and what we drink then is connected to good amal. If a person eats correctly with regards to the type of foods, the quantity, and the timing, those are the three main things, then they will have the ability to perform a good amal. And of course, in there, I'm including in the type of food, I'm including halal, because there is a very deep spiritual aspect to the food that we eat. There are more effects in the food and in other things in the environment than just the scientific, so to say, understanding of the food with regards to the nutrients that it has. So you may have something that's halal and another that's haram, but it's exactly the same in terms of nutrient content. It may be even the same type of animal, the breed, the quality, but one, Allah's name is recited upon it. It's slaughtered in the correct way, and the other isn't. There will be a spiritual effect on a person. The more a person understands that this world is not just comprised of the physical substance, the material, the atoms, the molecules. When you understand that the world also consists, first of all, in your own body, your ruh, and then there is nur, there is light, there is spiritual effect. There are things that, there are malaika around, and malaika frequent those places where there is the dhikr and obedience of Allah. And where there isn't the dhikr and obedience of Allah, and there is impurity, and there is shirk, and there is the worship of idols, then those places are deprived of the malaika and they become occupied by shayateen. And those shayateen have an impact, have an effect. And if you frequent places where the shayateen are more present, this will have an effect on your ruh. So, in the same way, the food that you eat takes effect from how it was slaughtered and whether Allah's name was taken particularly on it. And some people will go so far as to say, and it comes in some of the fiqh as well, the nature of the person who was slaughtering it. So all of this will have an impact. And today, we don't even have to go that far. Today, there are many people who are very strict with regards to hand slaughtered, and it's good. It should be like that. But what I mean is they are extra careful. They have extra taqwa with regards to making sure that those animals were slaughtered correctly by going themselves and seeing or slaughtering with their own hand. So one is the nutrient profile. The other is the spiritual aspect, from first the obedience of Allah in eating halal, and then in addition, whatever else can contribute and add. So Ramadan is supposed to have an additional benefit, and a benefit which comes in the ahadith of gaining health. But like I said, more than 99% of people do not gain that benefit of the Ramadan fast. But I've seen this throughout. There are particular communities who are very careful, but they are careful throughout the year in terms of what they eat. So they don't change it in Ramadan. So because they are healthy and they eat healthy and tayyib and pure, and their timing is correct, and the quantities that they eat are good, and they stay away from excessive sugars and preservatives and other artificial things and fried foods. Right? And then when Ramadan comes, they have an added benefit and an added boost because that's what they used to eating, and they don't change that. The problem with many of us is that out of Ramadan, we're not eating the right things. And in Ramadan, our diet is actually worse. So a lot of people, for example, for the morning meal, and I don't like to say breakfast anymore, it's the morning meal. So the morning meal, they're just having tea and toast, tea and bread, or they're skipping the morning meal entirely. There's no problem in delaying it, which was actually a practice of Sahaba, and it was called Hoda. So it was a bit later in the day, maybe 10, 11. I'm just estimating. There's no problem in delaying it. So it's actually a good thing also, because then you have a long period from the previous evening meal to the next morning meal. And that's, today people will call it intermittent fasting because they've created names for all these things which are already practiced in our Sunnah. So then you have an intermittent fasting period. And then a person has the Hoda meal. Now, what I'm saying is nowadays people don't have a good meal for Hoda. Either they have too little, right? And they have no protein in it, or they have a full morning meal, but it's entirely sugary based. Cornflakes, cereals, even oats. A lot of people have oats and they think this is really healthy, for the morning meal. But it's also just carbohydrates, whereas you're supposed to have protein for the morning meal. And then a person, the norm in the past was Hoda and Asha, the morning meal, which is a bit later morning, and then the early evening meal. Those were the two main meals. Today we have breakfast, lunch, supper, and we're really tiring out, the family, if they are the ones who are doing all the cooking, uh, by doing this 3 meals a day thing. But if you have Hoda and Asha, and you have protein in the morning, and then you have a lighter meal in the evening, so you're putting much less food in your stomach in the first place with regards to quantity. And you're having periods where you're not eating anything. So, not eating and having your stomach empty is supposed to be the norm. That's the other thing that people don't understand. So, the minute we get hungry, and we train our kids also on this, the minute they get hungry, you have to put something in their mouths. You should regard hunger as a normal state and satiation as a temporary state. So, we regard hunger as the temporary state and satiation as the normal state. Our stomachs have to be full the entire day. The minute we get a little bit hungry, you have to nibble on something. So you end up nibbling the entire day. So that becomes your norm. And the kids also think that that's the norm. But when you move to Hoda and Asha, the first thing that will happen if you do that is you will start to experience a lot of hunger and sugar cravings if that's all you're eating, if you're only eating sweet stuff. So I'm going to get to Ramadan, but I just want to speak about this first with regard to diet in general. So you are supposed to have protein in the morning, and you know, I'm sure you won't find it controversial because you are studying with me. You are supposed to be meat eaters. Human beings are meant to eat meat. And this is evidence from the Ishara of Quran also, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created certain animals for food, for eating. They have no other purpose. And in the Quran, Allah mentions and Allah used the words, with regards to sending them down. So there is a possibility that these animals, they were not, amongst the animals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created on the earth, but they are animals that were sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from where we don't know, because our knowledge is extremely limited. But Allah sent down min al-baqar ithnain, cows, camels, sheep, goats for our meat consumption. So Allah didn't mention with regards to birds. Obviously we eat chicken also, and there is, our Shaykh al-Hadith, he showed us in the Kutub where it confirms that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also ate chicken. This is confirmed by a Sahabi who somebody expressed a type of disgust when the Sahabi was eating chicken. Then the Sahabi indicated that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also ate this. So somebody can look into it further. Inshallah, at a later time, I can see, where this comes in the kitabs. But with regards to red meat, right? So red meat is something that you are supposed to be eating as a human being. And people are afraid to say this today because they think that you should be vegetarian. And they have this idea that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not like meat. And this is, wa na'udhu billah, we can never say this. Because there were occasions when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when meat was present, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked for that meat. And those ulama who are here, they'll know that some of our fiqh is based, on those, some of our masail was derived from that particular incident. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked for the meat. And we know that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam liked certain portions of the animal. And for Eid al-Adha, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam slaughtered many animals, many camels and many cows for the Ummahatul Mu'mineen. So, and in some hadith it comes Sayyidut Ta'ami Lahmun. The king or the leader of the foods is meat. So today we have this upside down pyramid. That food pyramid. And according to that food pyramid, the leader of the foods is carbs. Right? And then meat are somewhere up on top, and then nuts and seeds is the least. And it's total upside down. In some countries have realized this and they've turned it around and they've recognized that actually carbs should be the least amount in your diet, and the most should be proteins and healthy fats from nuts and seeds, avocados, things like that. And in those areas where they eat like that, where they eat meat and they eat nuts and seeds and healthy fats as their primary aspect in the diet, and they have their carbs, etc., are the minor aspect of their diet, they're much more healthy. So the first thing is that we have to understand that even out of Ramadan, things need to change. But Ramadan is an opportunity for us to change. A person should not feel guilty if they take opportunity from Ramadan also to correct their incorrect dietary habits, because this in turn will assist them in fasting, in number one, and in observing the ibadat, in being less in the kitchen and less occupied with food, because people are so occupied with food, even though they're not eating a proper breakfast, like I said, right? They're still occupied with food. They say that, are you living to eat or you eating to live, right? So most people are living just to eat, right? It's all about better food and this restaurant, and you want to go to this place and try that out. And some people's social media accounts, and they follow all this influencers, and that entire influencer is just about food. It's all about food, the food, shahwat. It's part of the shahawat, part of the desires, part of the inclination of the nafs. And we feel that our life is just about that. So the first thing is that to regard hunger as the normal state. So when you regard hunger as the normal state and you make this decision that this is the normal state, and remember, this was the normal state in the past. We would only have what could fit in the palm of Bilal radiallahu anhu. I think it's actually the palm, but the scholars can definitely correct me. Right? What could fit in the palm of Bilal radiallahu anhu was what they ate. That's what they would suffice on, most likely for the day. I don't know. It might even been longer than that. But we can't even fathom these things because, alhamdulillah, we make shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, our fridges are full, pantries are full, stomachs are full. But really, we need to rethink our idea with regards to hunger and satiation. And definitely, eating in this way has been proven to reduce glucose spikes. So this is what we're saying. If we change the way we eat with regards to not just the quantities, the type of foods and the timing, right? And obviously, I'm assuming that everybody understands first halal, but after halal, the type of food, the quantity, and the timing. So what happens in Ramadan? So in Ramadan now, if a person is already eating, healthy for the morning meals, what's healthy for the morning meal? First of all, healthy for any meal is no added sugars. right? No artificial things, no things with preservatives, no soft drinks, sugary drinks, cold drinks, right? And then you can go further to the next level where a person eats according to their mizaj. So if a person has a cold and moist mizaj or a water type constitution, then they're staying away from your dampening foods and your cold foods. And then if a person has cold and dry type of constitution, they're adding more spices like turmeric, etc., that can assist blood flow. So in that way, if a person has a very hot fire constitution, then you can't blame them for liking a lot of fruit because fruit is cooling in nature. But the fact of having protein for the morning and not having a lot of sugars, right, at all, if a person has a little bit of it, then it's in the form of complex carbohydrates, seeded bread, things like that. So that's now, if in Ramadan, then a person will move that to their suhoor time. And then they'll move what they used to have maybe as a midday snack to the iftar time. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, break with dates. And if you don't find dates, then water. So, and Nabi Alayhi Salam mentioned with regards to the benefits of either of the two, that dates are a barakah and water is a tuhur, it's a purification. So there's a further ishara in that also. That barakah is something of increase and growth. So those things which are high in sugars will cause things to increase in growth. And once it mentioned that Aisha radiallahu anha, when she wanted to put on some weight, she started to eat more dates. And this is, quite significant. And I love to find these principles within the Sunnah. So the principle is established, even though this is just from the tajruba of Sahaba, but it is better than the tajruba of science, the experience of science that we have today, which changes every few years. The ideas change. So Aisha radiallahu anha began eating more dates in order to increase her weight. So dates then are a high GI food. It releases glucose into the bloodstream very quickly. So we can then infer, and we know that from the other research that we looked at in light of these aspects of Sunnah, not just looking at the research on its own, because you can find conflicting research very easily. So we understand then that your high GI foods, your foods that release glucose into the blood very quickly, will all cause an increase. Now, sometimes a person wants increase. That's fine. Sometimes a person wants some more barakah, in their body, right? But that's not the problem is we're struggling with today. The problem we're struggling with today is people have a lot of barakah in their bodies. Right? That's percentage-wise, mashallah, there's a lot of barakah. And all of us struggle with the same issues. And the reason is because we are eating too much sugars. Dates are not healthy for everyone, every time, all the time, in any condition. The meaning of that is that you are recovering from an illness. So this is not good for you. So then she prepared some Swiss chard, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, this is good for you. So when we say things like dates are healthy, or this is healthy, or this is good, to be very careful because it really does depend on the mizaj of the person. It depends on what condition they're in. It can depend also on what climate they're in. So we have to see all of that. So if a person now then does this healthy fats and proteins for sehri, which they used to have for their ghada, and then they have their after iftar meal. So this is an important thing also, that what happens in our homes, and I find that now also it happens in the masjids, and that creates a real problem. But a person has to be disciplined. There's no way to eat healthy and be healthy without discipline. In previous zamanas, uh, you could just be healthy along with everybody else because there wasn't the availability of Coke and other things, right? You had to have water came from the mountain, right? Or it came from a sweet well, right? And you had food that, was cooked. The animal was slaughtered or the animal was hunted, and that comprised the diet of a person. So they remain healthy. But nowadays you have to be disciplined. So you have to be disciplined even in Ramadan, that for iftar, don't overdo it. right? Water and dates. And for those people who have diabetes, who suffer from sugar problems, and they want to use the opportunity of Ramadan to correct those things, and there's nothing wrong with that because it will be better for them, it's better for their health, and they will be rewarded for actually doing so. Their need should be correct. So they can have another fruit, a low GI fruit. Like I've got in those plans the berries, right? Whether it's raspberries or blueberries or mulberries or blackberries or strawberries. And there are other things like apples. I first recommend berries today because apples are so highly sprayed with chemicals nowadays and preservatives that they don't even discolor anymore, even after a long period of time. So healthy fruits that are lower on the GI scale, and you just have to search glycemic index and you'll get it for iftar. And that's all. Right. So basically, if you're having meals at home, I don't know about people's homes, but very often, because the other kids and everybody else, wants it, there's probably samosas there with chutney. So that's like really difficult even for me, to resist. But you have to resist it. And then you go perform your Maghrib Salah. So why I say today, even in the masjid, it's becoming a problem because the masjid spread also has cakes and biscuits and samosas and, what do they call it? Moons and spring rolls, right? And all of that is there. We can't stop people, right? But ideally, it should just be dates and water, right? You know, in the Arab countries, they have qahwa. They also do have, they serve the rolls, right? But they serve yogurt also and some other forms of the yogurt. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. So those are fine. And the yogurt side of things, the little bit of dates, the water. The kahwa is also okay, but my views on too much of caffeine. But those things are okay for iftar, and then you perform salah. You give your chance, your stomach to start working again. A lot of people, when they overeat at the time of iftar, they just end up being bloated. Then they bloated for the rest of and then they still have a full meal after Maghrib Salah. A lot of the time, Maghrib Salah becomes delayed because of all that food that's there at the time of iftar. But if a person determines that he's just going to have water and dates, and you can do it in the masjid as well. If you go and sit in the masjid and you sit there in the saf with your water and your dates, and you have that, and you wait 5 or 10 minutes, until the salah is performed. The masajid are different during Ramadan, right? And then you go home after your salah and your sunnah and your nawafil, and then you have a meal. So you've given yourself time, and now you have a meal. So that meal, then you'll be able to digest better. It should comprise of healthy foods with an emphasis on protein and healthy fats and fiber rich foods, right? And less sweet things, right? And nowadays we have to say fried things as well. That is going to be in general a very good diet for a person. And then I mentioned about not eating after Taraweeh Salah. But keep in mind that those who are performing Taraweeh, many times they do not eat anything because it affects the recitation and it affects, how they feel during the Taraweeh Salah. So then they would be eating something after Taraweeh. But eating after Taraweeh and then sleeping immediately on a full stomach is not a good thing, right? It's not something that should be done. So in Ramadan, a person can decide to eat less. We don't have to have a massive meal. We can actually have a bigger meal at the time of Sehri. And Sehri is recommended in the Hadith. It is described as a barakah. And the malaika, the angels also sit with the person who is having the Sehri meal. So a lot of people must say they fast also, and they fast without Sehri, and they think there's something great in that. There isn't anything great in anything which damages your health, unless there was no other choice to do that in the pursuit or the preservation of deen. So now they have to do without. Right? That's a different matter. But when you have the ability, you should eat because you should preserve your health so that you have the ability to perform ibadah. So it's actually better to have a full suhoor, sehri, pre-dawn meal, whatever it's called, the different names are used. Right? And then you can have a very light meal in the evening, whether it's before Taraweeh Salah or after. If it's very light, it's not a problem. I say don't have anything after Taraweeh Salah because generally it's not light. Generally everything comes out at that time, and the halim and the cakes and biscuits and the tea, and the people sit around and you can sit around, no problem. It's not necessarily the best thing, right? For Ramadan, the best is to sleep immediately, right? And then wake up early for tahajjud, and then have the suhoor meal. Read some Quran after Taraweeh Salah. Ramadan is the month of Quran. If you are less focused on food and the different varieties of food, you will be able to spend more time in ibadah. And that is the practice of our pious people of the past, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and the Salaf al-Salihin, those who preceded us, and the great scholars of Islam, and even just the general population, the general Muslim population in the past also, that Ramadan would be a time when there was less focus on food and more focus on the ibadah of the month, on the Quran, on the standing at night, and obviously the fasting during the daytime. So that's the overall thing. So if and this is something that can benefit everybody, irrespective of what they are suffering from, right? Except for a few people who maybe are undergoing treatment. They have particular issues that they're struggling with. So I will explain a couple of things. Ramadan, the ulama tell us, comes from Ramadan. Ramadan can correct me, but it refers to heat. It refers to the heat that's created, right? And it implies that around the fasting of Ramadan produces heat in a person's body, and it will produce dryness also in a person's body. And that's where the heat is coming from, because you're not consuming water, you're not consuming food. So a certain level of dryness will be created. In some kutub, it comes, some of the books, it comes that Ramadan is good. One of the things that are good for reducing phlegm. So Ramadan, in that way, the fasting of Ramadan, if a person is doing it and they're not, consuming a lot of sugars now in the time of Sehri and the time of Iftar, then they'll get that benefit of reducing phlegm in the body. And reducing phlegm is extremely good for many, many illnesses, particularly cancer. So the scientific world has spoken a lot recently, and a lot of research has been done. But in the last years, about autophagy, the process that the body goes through when it's starved or not having food for a good couple of hours, 5 to 6 hours. The body goes into a mode of autophagy, which is where it goes around, certain cells in the body go around and collect damaged cells and even cancer cells and removes them from the body. So I had a lot of patients, and I still have till now, a lot of patients who went into remission just because of regular fasting. Their cancer came under control, and that's what they did. They didn't opt for any chemotherapy, any radiotherapy. They just adopted Monday and Thursday fasting. And the way I said to do it was absolutely no sugars on those days, no carbohydrates, no fruit. Obviously, it means no dates, no honey, no milk, no breads, no rice on those 2 days that a person fasts. So it's only proteins and healthy fats. So this is what happens when a person does that and they reduce their food intake. So this is good for everyone. But what you will have is some people will be susceptible to more dryness in Ramadan, and will also, so it's determined by their mizaj, determined by the illness, determined by the climate, determined by the length of the fast. The only solution for them, or at least, okay, there's two. One is that they also have to make sure that they're eating well for suhoor and they're not having dehydrating substances like tea and coffee. Now, some people cannot do without it. So you got two options. One is that they have it after Taraweeh Salah, and then that caffeine lasts for them the next day of fasting. Or the other is that they have a little bit of tea or a little bit of coffee at the time of suhoor. But if they have an illness that's characterized by dryness, and a lot of these people do have it, then they're going to have to reduce that and add in nourishing, moistening medicinal. So then you're looking at herbal formulas itself, like soften wood, like clarify metal, like physio wrap. Nourish essence a bit warm in nature, but you're looking at these to combat the dryness that develops in a person during Ramadan. And that brings me to another point, which I don't know if it's relevant now, but I can speak about it a little bit with regards to Does fasting produce heat or cold? Because a lot of people feel very cold in Ramadan with the fasting. In the beginning, when you fast, it produces heat in the body. After a couple of days of fasting, some people a week, some people 3 or 4 days, a coldness starts to develop in the body because of just the lack of nutrients during that particular time of the fast. So it's a normal phenomenon where when a person doesn't have any food, they start to feel more cold, especially for a prolonged period. So that is also possible, and that has to be moderated in a person. But we have to understand it's a natural process. It's not an unhealthy thing at all. But you have to see the mizaj, and you have to see what is to be added in a person's diet. If they have that, you might need to add some warming medicinals in a case like that, if a person needs it. So that is with regards to the diet. I think I've spoken quite a bit on this point. So in the remainder of this lesson, I'll be going through the different herbal medicinals that practitioners can use during Ramadan to assist people who have particular illnesses or a strong aspect of their mizaj, like dryness or coldness or moisture or heat, is influencing how they are feeling during the fast, or they need ongoing treatment for a particular illness that may have been present from before, or you've just taken the patient in for consultation. So we'll end the session here for general, but it will continue for practitioners who want to know how to apply the different herbal medications for their patients in Ramadan, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for attending. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.